Right, good morning everybody. Really nice to see a nice full room. This is our second day, so hopefully I've improved slightly, or I may have peaked too early yesterday and it'll all be downhill today. So my name is David White, and very pleased to welcome you to this taster of the joys of Read Learning. What we like to feel is that in a space of an hour can give you an idea of the sort of things we can do on our courses, particularly in this case a creative thinking course. So I want to start with a question. Do we need to be creative? What do you think? Do we need to be creative? I've got a few nods at the head. I mean, you wouldn't come in this room otherwise, would you? But if you think about it, the world's most successful modern organizations have proved that creativity is often more important than physical resources. It's not about how much money you've got. It's not about how much land you've got. It's not about how much raw materials you've got. If you think of companies like Apple or Google or Twitter or Netflix or Samsung, any of those, Facebook and so on, they are all really triumphs of creativity, having great ideas rather than huge amounts of material. So I'd like to think that whatever we do for a living, we need to be creative. Whether we're in finance, sales, human resources, office management, it really doesn't matter. So the trouble is, though, there's lots of barriers to us doing that, quite often our own thinking, and I'm going to check on that in a moment. So we're going to break through the barriers and look at some creative thinking tools that you might be able to use to help you. Now, we've only got 1 hour, so we're going to have to rattle along, but do feel free to interact. I will ask questions of you, but do ask questions of me. If you disagree with something strongly, just say the word, and I'll ignore you. So the objectives are that you'll know, hopefully, 3 key tools. We cover a lot of things on our courses, but just going to give you a taster of 3. Try them out in some little exercises. Don't worry, I'm not going to be asking you to do anything which is embarrassing or that you're going to have to give feedback on, but just please interact with me and hopefully believe in your abilities to be more creative. Now, a person who provides a little bit of inspiration for us on this is this gentleman, Albert Einstein. And while arguably one of the most intelligent people in the world, he actually said that imagination is more important than knowledge. So the creative thinking, being able to make that mental leap that meant he came up with things like the theory of relativity, which I still don't understand, absolutely vital. So on the one hand, we've got that, but on the other hand, what's it like in most organizations? Is it more like this cartoon? The boss is saying, you get back to that goddamn cubicle and start thinking outside the box. So we put you in a box, but we want you to think outside it. In fact, one person I spoke to misspoke that little cliche, thinking outside the box, and described it as thinking outside the boss, which I thought was about right, because quite often the moment you come up with a fresh idea, what do they say to you? Won't work, we've done it before, we haven't got the budget, and so on. So those barriers are everywhere. So I'd like to check on you, though, first of all. Put up your hands if you would say you are naturally creative. Hands up, the naturally creative people in the room here. Well, we've got a few hands ago, but we started with 1 at the back, and then I think a few others thought, well, maybe I can. Now, if on the other hand I'd said, are you a reasonable driver? Do you try to keep fit? Are you a friendly and helpful person? Most people put their hands up. But we do have a problem with creativity, and quite often it's because we associate it with things like art and music. And we think, well, I wasn't very good at art, and I wasn't very good at music, so I'm not very creative. But in our environment here, what we're really talking about is just the ability to come up with fresh solutions, new ways of looking at things, new ideas to solve the practical problems of life, not to produce artwork, not to play a musical instrument, and so on. So let's find out about your brain. Is it up to the task? We've obviously got a few creative people whose brains are, but what about the rest of us? Now, you've got 10 billion neurons, and it would take a Cray supercomputer 100 years to accomplish what you can do, what your brain can do in, well, how long do you think? Compared with a Cray supercomputer, how long do you need? 2 hours, 2 hours. We've got a slightly slow member of the audience here. The actual answer, you'll be pleased to know, is 1 minute. So, and that includes you, that you didn't know the truth of the answer there. So think about that. Even our computers, which we often think are cleverer than us, we're way cleverer. Our human mind is the most complex object in the known universe. So we're brilliant. Now, you might be saying, yes, but I've been having too much red wine of an evening. Now, we tell ourselves red wine's good for us, but I was reading in the Radio Times, new program on this week, says, no, absolutely not true, which is a bit of a shame, because it's my personal favorite. But let's say we're having a little too much wine, we're doing those sort of things. So by the age of 80, what percentage of your capacity would you have left? Even if you're drinking all that wine and losing all those cells, anyone got a figure? Give me a percentage. Percentage left. Think of your eyesight, you've probably only got about 50%, hearing only about 50%, muscle elasticity probably even less. I won't ask you because you'll give us such a negative answer, but what do you think? What percentage of your capacity? 60? 60? Well, I've got great news for you. The reality is, unless you encounter a disease of some sort, Alzheimer's or whatever, you will have 97% of your capacity left. Now, I think you have to agree that although we might have that capacity, are we using it? And quite often, when people retire, they don't use their brains as much. Those do who go and learn a foreign language or take up art and all of that sort of thing. But a lot of people, when they retire, they kind of relax a bit too much. We don't use our brain, and think of it like a muscle. If you don't use your muscle, what happens to it? It gradually declines, it atrophies. So we need to work on that muscle. Now, I like to think that there's sort of two muscles in the brain, a left brain muscle and a right brain muscle. Now, when it comes to creativity, we often say that the creative side of the brain is more one side than the other. Is it left or right? What do you think? Right, you're absolutely right. So the left brain, on the other hand, is very good for a lot of things like speech, calculation, reading and writing, very logical, very fact-based, sort of likes hierarchy, likes order. And I tend to think, and I'm going to risk a sort of gender-related remark here, but I think you might approve, that the right brain can be a bit serious, a bit adult, and a bit masculine. And the ultimate right brain loves detail. The right brain is a train spotter's brain, okay? Now, funnily enough, if you go to the extreme on this, they sometimes say that autism is the ultimate male brain. And if you think of the kind of hobbies that men go for and the way they do it, you can sort of see what's going on there. So what about the other half? Well, the other half of the brain is really where we see art and music, so if you like, a definition of creativity there, but also emotional sensitivity, imagery, creativity, and intuition. And don't we often talk about female intuition? We rarely talk about male intuition. So from where I sit, I tend to think that the right brain is where the sense of humor really lives, more childlike, more feminine, and looks at the whole rather than detail. Now, as I said, it's a bit of a risk making any sort of gender stereotypes, and the reality is we all have both halves of the brain, so we can all do this. But which side of the brain does work, your normal work, emphasize? Is it left or right? What do you think? It's left, isn't it? We tend to find at work, we're dealing with numbers, we're dealing with documents, we're dealing with detail, and we can end up very strong in the left side, but the right side of our brain doesn't get the exercise that we really need to have. And if you're coming up with ideas and you just say, I've got no data to back this up, it's just sheer intuition, I just feel this will be right, quite often the left brain manager says what? No facts, not interested. So we need to accept that there's a little bit of resistance, another barrier. So, time for a quick brain test, and I want you to participate in this, please. And I want you to look at the chart of words I'm going to put up and say the words out loud as quick as you can. So the next up will be a series of words, and I just want you to all say them as quick as you can, just get through them as fast as you can. Are you ready for this? I'm going to time it, see how well you do. So all you're doing is saying the words. Right, off we go. Okay, so that's 11 seconds from the front row here. Now, I think that was a bit too easy. Now I'd like you to look at the chart and say the color the word is printed in, not the word. Okay, say the color the word is printed in, not the word. Right, here we go. Ready? See how well you can do on time. Off we go. Okay, excellent stuff. Well, you'll be pleased to know that the the timing for the first one, I used the same person in the audience, hope you don't mind, was 11 seconds. Second time, 23 seconds. So twice as long to do the same task, but in a slightly different way. Now, what does this tell us? Well, the right brain is the one that likes the colors. The right brain says, oh yeah, I want to tell you about the colors because the colors are beautiful and creative and interesting. But the left brain is in charge of words. So what does the left brain try and do? As you're trying to say the color, the left brain says, no. That isn't green, that's yellow. It says yellow. So those of you who managed to do the second one really quickly, and I hope that included some of those who put their hands up and said they were creative earlier, great news. You are naturally better, but twice as long otherwise. Now, the interesting thing, what is the great indicator that you're naturally a bit right-brained? What is the great indicator? The easy indicator that you could know almost as soon as you meet somebody. But it's very simple, they're left-handed. The right brain controls the left side, left brain, the right side. So most of us, of course, are right-handed. Most of us are therefore a little bit left-brained. Now, it's a bit of a stereotype, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's worth sticking with. So we need to think about that. So what I want to do now is to introduce you to the first of our sort of tools, or rather take a look at the tools and then we'll go through them one at a time. So what tool can we use to improve our creativity? Well, I'm going to look at three really. The first is about mental attitude, the power of the positive. If we're really positive, we can do more. Would you agree? If you wake up in a good mood, you're feeling $1 million, you somehow manage to break through the barriers of the day. On the other hand, if the mood is negative, the problems seem insurmountable. The second is I want to change the way you look at the world. In other words, create a new map. Because again, we tend to work within a vision of the world that we're very familiar with, and sometimes that holds us back. So new ways of looking at things can be very helpful. And quite often that map creates a set of rules, and so maybe we need to look at how we can reverse those rules and actually say, I know that's the standard way of doing something, but we're going to break that rule. We're going to do something differently. So let's look at topic one, the power of the positive. Now, a nice little piece of research said something about this one that I just want to share with you, and it's about creativity and luck. So I asked earlier those of you who thought you were a little bit on the creative side, and we got about half a dozen hands up. Hands up if you would say you were lucky. God, even fewer people are saying they're lucky. So most of you don't buy a lottery ticket then, I would think. Because remember, the odds of winning are 14 million to 1 against. If you buy a lottery ticket on a Wednesday, you stand more chance of being dead by Saturday than winning. As you can see, I'm not employed by Camelot this morning. Now, the thing about this, the researchers said, well, we want to find out if there is such a thing as luck. Because I have to admit, my mother-in-law is very lucky when it comes to buying raffle tickets and so on. She always seems to win something. So she buys a lot of raffle tickets. But recent research on luck invited two groups of people to take part, those who thought themselves lucky and those who didn't. So people said, yeah, I want to take part, I'm really lucky. Others said, yeah, I want to take part because I'm not. Now, both were given the same simple exercise to do, which was just sorting cards, like sort of playing cards. But some of the cards had messages on them, little handwritten messages, such as, hand in this card for an immediate prize. Now, guess what happened? What do you think the lucky group did that was different to the unlucky group? The lucky group handed in the cards, and the unlucky group ignored the words. They read them, but they said, oh, I don't suppose that applies to this exercise. That's probably left over from something else. So they didn't actually apply them. So luck, on that basis, is just about being awake and just about saying, hey, if there's an opportunity, if there's an idea, why don't I just take it? Why don't I just say yes to things? So again, positive mental attitude. So I'd like to think creativity is a bit the same. So going back to my mother-in-law, the reason she wins more lottery prizes or raffle prizes is because she buys more tickets. Years ago, I said, oh, I don't win, so I don't buy. But I still forget that I don't buy the tickets, but I do remember that I don't win. Well, if you don't play, you can't win. So attitude is everything. So how can we give ourselves the attitude advantage? And it's all about focus and attention. Now, hands up if you've got children here. I don't mean with you. I mean, you've got children at some point. Yes, quite a few people with children. Okay. We're going to talk about children a bit later as well, because I think they're an interesting one here. Now, with children, if you tell your child, doesn't matter how old they are, don't touch the wet paint as you're busy painting a door, what do they actually hear? What do they hear? They hear, touch the wet paint. That's what they hear. Because only one word says don't, the rest is what you want them to focus on. Except what you want them to focus on is not doing it rather than doing it. It's a bit like if I say to you, don't think of pink elephants. Whatever you do, don't think of pink elephants. A few of you have probably got a few pink elephants wandering around in your mind. So what do we say instead? Instead of saying don't touch the wet paint so they don't put their horrible paws all over your lovely fresh paint, what do we say? Well, I like to think we've got to say something positive. What I always found with my kids, the answer was give them a paintbrush and say, help Daddy paint the door. And after about 5 seconds, they're completely fed up of the work and they go away and they don't touch the wet paint. So focus on the positive. And the power of the positive is everywhere. If you saw a charity ad saying 10 million children are starving to death, please help, is that fundamentally a positive or negative message, would you say? Positive or negative? It's a bit negative, isn't it? The negativity is that the overwhelming part of the message is that 10 million children are starving to death. Now, while they're saying, do something, please help, what do we all feel? Can you help 10 million children? Probably not. Bill Gates might be able to, but we don't have his money. So instead of doing something, the negativity of the image says, I can't do anything. I'll just keep going, and I walk away and I'm feeling pretty unhappy. I haven't helped. I couldn't help. So what could that charity ad say that would make it a positive statement, that would make you do something? Any suggestions? Say that again?
£3 a month and build a well.
Excellent. The suggestion there is to just, instead of focusing on the children, say £3 a month builds a well, saves a life. And suddenly we're thinking, well, we can afford that. Well, mine are actually cheaper than yours. I have to say my version of the ad is £1 saves the starving child. To be fair, it wouldn't be £1 in total. It would be £1 a week. Please save a life today. And suddenly, what are we thinking? £1. Yeah, I've got £1. I've got £1 in my pocket. I can do that. We don't need to know there are 10 million starving. And when we get home and we're able to tell our loved ones, hey, I saved a life today, how do we feel? We feel great, and our family adore us too. So what I'm suggesting is be positive, but be positive about goals. Focus on your goals. Now, those of you who arrived early might have seen me arrive. I arrived on my little fold-up bicycle, one of those people who clearly thinks he's lucky because I cycled here this morning. But it is a dangerous activity in London. Anyone here cycled here this morning? No, I had a feeling that would have a low turnout. Well, the most frightening thing with cycling in London is cycling between lines of traffic, going up here. And you've got to do that if you're going to get somewhere with any speed. So what do you think the advice is to the cyclist contemplating going down that wall of death, that Death Star corridor that's down the middle there? It's a difficult, I mean, the obvious advice is don't do it. The obvious advice is just be patient, but you can't, you're in a hurry. So the advice that's given, and it's in the books, you'd find it if you ever want to study this area, is focus on the gap, not the obstacle. So focus on the solution, not the problem. If you look at the problem, if you look at the big van, lo and behold, you steer straight into it, because you tend to go where you're looking, whereas you should look where you want to be going. So I suppose what I'm saying here is, with problem solving, don't focus on the problem, focus on what you'd like to be doing instead. So let's take an example or two. Do any of you occasionally struggle with the problem of getting home late? That people want you to stay working longer than your allotted hours? Yeah, getting a few nods to the head there. Happens to all of us. We're probably working longer hours than we ever have. Okay? And that doesn't fit well with family life. How many of us actually say there's just too much email these days? The phone doesn't ring anymore. No one comes to talk to me. Everyone just sends me emails, and lo and behold, what am I doing? I'm doing the same. So let's turn both of those into positives, because let's face it, they're not easy to solve. The work is considerable. Yeah, everybody emails me. So what do we do? Well, let's turn them into positive goals. So what we might say is, okay, I can't fix it all, but all I want to do is be home on time one night per week, and I'm going to do that because I want to take the kids swimming. So I'm not just going to go home because that's nice. I'm going to go home to do something positive, and I'm going to book the swimming lessons, and I'm going to tell the kids, and it's what they want to do, it's their idea as much as mine. So suddenly, on the day that you're meant to be doing that, and the boss says, hey, we need to talk about this, I need you to stay late, what are we able to say? Could help any night that this one, but it's the kids' swimming lessons. Got to take the kids swimming. And hopefully, what's the boss thinking at that point? Oh, well, in that case, that's an appointment you've got to do. But they might even think, why aren't I taking my kids swimming? Why am I not doing that? So if you start doing it, and lo and behold, you discover that one night a week's easy, so maybe we add a second night, maybe we add a third. To be fair, we don't have to take the swimming every night. You create a sort of gradual improvement. And the same with the too much email. Part of the reason we have too much email is we're emailing other people, so they're emailing us back. So instead, why don't we just set ourselves a simple goal of, say, a conversation with each team member, each person we have to work with, by phone or face-to-face, at least once a day. So we say, well, I could email them, but why don't I just walk over, have a chat? And of course, when you go and have a chat with someone, it's actually quite pleasant. You might have a coffee. You might learn something interesting. You might share some concerns or interests. And lo and behold, they suddenly start doing the same back to you, because I'll pop over and see David because he doesn't push me away. He's happy to have a chat. So putting it away another way with all of this is be positive. And Michael Jordan, the famous basketball player, said, I never look at the consequences of missing a big shot. When you think about the consequences, you always think of a negative result. So he's very much saying the important thing in life is focus on the positive, focus on the thing you can do, try doing it, getting home early once a week shouldn't be too difficult, and it begins to solve our problem. So that's about positive mental attitude. Topic 2 is about creating a better map of the world. We tend to be stuck with the map of the world we're born with, or we grow, and as we join organizations, we take on their map, and we get stuck with that as well. But is the map the reality? So I want to show you a little map, and tell me what you can see. So here it comes, and tell me what can you see in that map. So I'll just step back a bit. So anybody see anything in there other than just blobs and so on? Anybody see a face or anything like that? Yeah? But man with a beard, look like anyone in particular? Jesus. I'm always heartened when halfway through a session people start announcing that they've seen Jesus. Clearly, and a man with a beard, she said as well. Well, obviously. But where is he? In the middle? So there we go, sort of in that area there. And okay, so has everyone now seen him? Yeah, a few of you have seen him. Now the thing is, once you've seen him, can you make him disappear? Once he's appeared, sort of in this area here, bridge of the nose, eyes, beard, sort of there. Once you've seen him, does he go away? Well, he doesn't. And in fact, you get stuck with him. Now, well, I'll tell you what the map is. It's the surface of Mars. It isn't Jesus, it isn't Elvis, and it isn't me either. It is nothing, just a bit of landscape. But Jesus won't go away. He sticks with it. So what I suppose I'm trying to get at here is that sometimes our biggest barrier is once we think we've seen the world one way, we're kind of stuck with it. So I want to give you a mapping tool to avoid this problem. And it's really about the difference between thinking in an analog way and a digital way. Now, those two clocks, or two watches rather, one is telling the time digitally, one is telling the time by analog. Now, in theory, the digital time is the easiest, or 11:39 and 60, yeah, I get that. But why is the analog actually more useful to us? Most of you here have probably got a watch with hands on it. Why is that more useful? Well, what it tends to give you is not just the time now, but a sense of where you are in the day. So if I glance at my watch, and I only have to glance at it to see it's roughly 11 o'clock, means great news for you, I'm half done already. The misery will end soon. But the important thing is I don't need to know that it's 10:58 and 23 seconds. I just need to know roughly where I am in the world. So let's think analog, let's think picture rather than data. Let's think analog rather than digital. And the thing I want to share with you, the tool I want to share with you is mind mapping. Now, I expect a few of you use mind mapping along the way, but it's one of those tools that often I ask people, do you know mind mapping? And they say, yes. And then I say, well, do you use it? And they say, no, because they haven't quite got it. So I want to explain mind mapping to you. So all that happens is, it's a variation on brainstorming. You start in the middle with an image, and then the lines off are the big things. So in terms of uses of mind mapping, idea generation, obviously, wouldn't be talking about it otherwise, but you can use it for note-taking in meetings, revision, that sort of stuff, organizing information, or lists, to-do lists, project lists, and so on. So I want to bring this to life, though, with a little example of using a mind map, and in this case, I want to use it to solve a problem, to come up with a creative solution to a murder. Well, it was a murder, it might have been a suicide, either way it was a death. And it was a very sad death, I think sad to most of us in the room here. We lost an old friend, someone we'd grown up with over the years, someone we'd probably see 1 or 2 times a week on the high street. And that old friend was a place that we'd have some certain pleasures in life, probably involving spending some of our pocket money on some sweets. Now that old friend was, of course, which big shop that disappeared a couple of Christmases ago? Woolworths. Dear old Woolworths. It was there, it was part of our childhood, and it's gone. So our job is to find out who or what killed Woolies. All right? So let's think of something to put in the middle of our flip chart here. Well, the Woolworths logo wouldn't be a bad idea. Now, what was the Woolworths logo? Anyone remember? It's not that long ago. A red W? Yeah? Any other suggestions? Because there were a few. It was the Woolworths name and so on. In fact, it's actually quite hard to remember exactly what the Woolworths identity was. Whereas if I said, who's that? You'd all immediately know it's Nike, just as the simple tick. So Woolworths, bit of a problem to start with, but we'll go with the red W because it takes up less space. So given that the logos have been a bit of a problem, what would be the first place we might look to find out what might have gone wrong that killed Woolies? The logo's a bit of a problem, so where might we look? Well, it could be marketing, couldn't it? Marketing communications clearly wasn't working, so I just put marketing there, and we could see that there's clearly an issue with the brand. Problem there, the brand isn't working. Anything else under marketing we ought to take a look at while we're there? Any other aspects of marketing, communications? Yep, well, it would be the advertising. So are their ads any good? It might be their PR, it might be the web, and so on. So there's a number of things we might look at and actually discover maybe this was suicide, maybe they didn't know what they were doing. But marketing's only one thing. We also need to say, well, that was them communicating, but what were they communicating about? So we need to take a look at their products, absolutely. And if we look at the Woolworths product range, what would we see there? Well, first of all, I've used the word range, and the range was a bit too what, would you say? Was the range nice and narrow, or was it, far too broad? Far too many different things. And what about, what are the other things that we might look at about their products? Quality, absolutely. And unlike somewhere like, Primark is not called Prada Mark for nothing. Although their quality is low, what are they very good at? Style, design. So we might say, I don't think any, I remember it was Winfield was the label. I think if I'd had Winfield on my jeans when I was growing up, I wouldn't have been able to go out in public. There was no sense of design. But there's also issues around price, stuff there. So we've got quite a lot there. So what else might we look at? What's another big thing that might have killed off Woolworths? Say again? Finance? Well, finance is part of all of these. But what about, we've got what they sell, but where they sell it, absolutely. So the distribution, and these days, of course, shops is one, but what's the other big one? That the web, absolutely. And without the web, and they weren't really on the web, they didn't really do anything about it, we've got a problem. So web was a problem. But what about the shops? Were they stylish? No. So style wasn't great. Were they, did they have lots of services in there, like a cafe and things like that? No, so services were poor. And of course, you've got the issue of where they were, and they were quite big, so location, size, and in fact, given the amount that people spent in there, probably didn't work very well. So we're doing well. We've got 3 key things. I reckon there's a couple more before we've absolutely found the murderer. Well, we've got what we've sold, but we haven't talked about, very importantly, who we sell it to. So in other words, the customer. And what would we say was the profile of the Woolworths customer? Were they a wealthy person? No. So money-wise, probably not great. Were they sort of spending what you'd spend in Tesco's, £50, £60 every time you go in? No, so low spend, so their spend was low. The age bracket, they were probably either quite old or quite young. Remember, we used to go in there as children to do our weekly shoplifting. And then one more big thing. So we've got how we communicated, where we sold our products, what our products were, who our customer was. Well, no one these days can ignore one last big one. What's it going to be? The competition. And name me a competitor that you think might have killed Woolworths. Supermarkets? Yeah. Supermarkets, which one in particular? I think I might have heard Tesco just then. And would you agree, the moment we've got the name Tesco on here, well, if you're competing with Tesco, what might you say to yourselves? We're all doomed. Okay, so in a way, that might be our killer. But if we were thinking about understanding what's happening in a business, what's happening if we're trying to analyze a problem, mind mapping is just a lovely way to get this together. And I think you've produced a good analysis of what happened to Woolworths. And of course, it's also happened to companies like HMV and Comet and so on. It's all over the place. It's a real challenge. So we do our map, and hopefully we get somewhere with it. It gives us some tools and techniques. Now, I've just done that using a flip chart, which I think is always a nice way. So one person yesterday, for example, was saying that she was having trouble, she worked in a school, getting the staff to take part in something. Well, some teachers use mind mapping with the students. So to say, well, let's mind map that problem, it almost gives the teachers a chance to say, gosh, some of the things we teach are actually useful, so let's try them out. But all of these are software tools. An awful lot of them are free, and then you can just use them. You can get apps for your smartphone, and all of those things will work. So that's 2 topics out of the way. We've got our mapping and we've got our attitude. Topic 3 is about reversing the rules. Now, rules in life are valuable. Would you agree? It's useful knowing what the conventions are. When you go abroad, it's useful to know, do they tip here or do they not tip here? Do you check the taxi fare when you get in the cab, or does it have a meter? You need to know the rules. And a lot of them are unwritten, and some of them are hopeless, and you need to break them because they're the patterns that stifle creativity. How many of you, when you started a new job, have looked at the way they do things and you've actually suggested straight away, oh, why'd you do it that way? Because it seems awfully long-winded. And of course, what's the answer? We've always done it that way. And that's fair enough, that's your culture, but doesn't necessarily mean it's right. It's just kind of set solid as a behavior. It's unwritten. It's not in the staff handbook, but it's what people do. So rules can lock us into old solutions that may have been outmoded by technology, by wealth, and so on. You think of the rules of the high street. We talked about Woolworths, but remember we used to go into record shops because that's how we bought our music. We don't anymore. We used to go into travel agents. That was the rule. That's how you booked your holiday. We don't do that anymore. So the trick is to identify those rules and seek ways to overcome them before you become the victim of the rule or before everyone else has solved it apart from you. So explore the uses and the non-uses. So I want to give you a few nice sort of case study examples, light-hearted examples about rule reversal. Well, with advertising, you often say, you can't say you won't like our product. No one's going to advertise any product that says you won't like this. Is that completely true? There is one company that says half of you won't like our product. Marmite, absolutely, Marmite. So there's their nice little ad with my mate and I hate. And they're actually making a real virtue of the fact that this product is probably too tough for some of you. And so if you are in the my mate category, you can congratulate yourselves on your sort of sheer strength. If you're in the I hate category, you're a bit of a wuss, really. You haven't really got your taste buds sorted out. And there's another one in the food area I rather liked, and this is the rule this time. We can't say that you can't buy our product. We're not going to actually advertise something and say, oh, but you can't have it. Now, the next product, you'll be pleased to know, almost everybody in this room, according to the advert, couldn't have. Absolutely right. The Yorkie bar. And there it is, a version of it, this time the Blokey bar. The history of Yorkie is rather nice, because Yorkie was developed, it was the most successful new product launch back in the 70s. It was developed after they did some research on why men didn't buy chocolate. And their first thought was men don't like chocolate. But I don't know about you, if you leave chocolate lying around at home, do the men folk manage to get through it? They do. And so their research actually said, no, they like chocolate. They just don't like the way it's packaged. They don't like the Cadbury's Dairy Milk Bar. That doesn't fit with, say, the truck driver traveling or someone driving, the traditional traveling salesman. So they discovered then that what they really wanted was a product more like a Mars bar, something that you could just sort of unwrap and bite the end off it. So they developed the Yorkie, and the Yorkie had the logo and livery of the Eddie Stobart trucks to give it that manly look. It was a huge success. And when they decided to relaunch it, they thought, well, we're not going to be so straightforward this time because it was a bit naff. Instead, we're going to say it's definitely not for girls. Now, there were some complaints to the Advertising Standards Authority and said this is sexist and demeaning. Well, the Advertising Standards Authority wrote back and said, well, we think it's a joke, actually. We don't think it's a serious remark. But let me just check, though. Were any of you offended by the Yorkie, it's definitely not for girls? In fact, did any of you say, well, I'm actually going to go and buy one now because it's not for me? Getting a few nods of the head there. Great, that's what we like to see. So you'd have to say, doing the opposite of common sense worked great. They could have offended half the audience, instead they got more customers. I was doing some work with an advertising design agency, and they showed that you can break rules to make life interesting in almost any circumstance. And this was seen on the doors in a design agency's offices. So there were two doors in particular. They were both just off reception. And one of them said, there's probably a queue, and the other one said, this toilet is probably not as nice as the ladies. So what had they done? They'd done a nice little joke on the hers and his there as a way of making, making life interesting, but also telling their potential customers, if we can make the toilet door sign interesting, we can make your boring product just as interesting. So I really like that. And it was also quite accurate, because there probably is a queue, and yes, this toilet is not as nice as the ladies. So that rule reversal formula turns up everywhere, not least in jokes. Spike Milligan, a few years ago, obviously before he died, he said, he was asked as he was getting old, he said, well, when I die, I want to go to heaven, but if Jeffrey Archer's there, I'd rather go to Lewisham. Which, as I live near Lewisham, I really rather liked. So that was a nice little remark. Wherever Spike Milligan is, obviously, sadly, Jeffrey Archer is still with us, but let's see if he ends up in Lewisham. And then even the rules of car advertising. Traditionally in America, for instance, if you look at car ads, they all show images, they're in color, country lanes, pretty people, perfection. Every car ad looked roughly the same. You'd open an old copy of National Geographic, it'd be glossy, big, shiny car, everything looking lovely, lovely family, lovely clear roads. So when Volkswagen decided to launch the Volkswagen Beetle in America, they realized they'd got a bit of a problem, because their car wasn't pretty like the others. It didn't have lots of lovely chrome on it. It wasn't something big and making a huge statement. It was everything that the Americans wouldn't like. So they broke all the rules of the advertising as well. And here's one of their ads. And as you can see, it's not in color. The car is not anywhere. It's just against a white background. And look at the slogan. The slogan is lemon. Now, what's a lemon? A lemon's a dud. It's useless. So they're breaking the rules, saying our car's a dud. Our car's useless. But of course, it prompted you to think, well, why are they saying that? And you'd read the copy, which obviously you can't see, and what do you discover? Well, there's a tiny misalignment of the glove box lid, so this one goes back to the production line because Volkswagen only produces high quality. And if you think, the ads have never changed. It still says that quality is everything. Only wish everything in life was as reliable as a Volkswagen. So we get rule reversal everywhere. A chap called James Dyson broke the rule that vacuum cleaners must have bags. He even took his technology to Hoover, who said, we wrote the rules on vacuum cleaners. Vacuum cleaners must have bags. We like selling customers the bags to put the dust in. But he said, but this will work better. This will do a better job for people. We don't care. Well, Hoovers tend to not have bags now because they learnt the error of their ways. The Post-it note was the result of a glue that wouldn't set. And the logic was, well, just throw it away, start again. But no, the designer in question at 3M, which is the people who make the Post-it note, the R&D people are told to work on their own projects one day a week. Don't do what your boss tells you, work on your own. So on those Fridays, when they work on their own, they actually work with huge enthusiasm because they want to prove that their ideas are great. This guy wanted to prove his idea was great, and he eventually realized there was a place for a glue that doesn't completely set, and the post-it note was it. But the funny thing is, when he showed it to management, they just didn't get it. They said, why does the little note need to be glued down? I don't understand. So he persuaded management to let him at least put the little notes around the place in the 3M organization. And guess which people got it straight away, that this was really useful? Well, I have to say, there's people like yourselves, people who were leaving notes rather than getting notes. Because they said, this is great, because with this, I can stick this on this idiot boss's forehead and he won't forget what I've told him, or put it on his computer screen, put it on a case, or whatever the case may be. Even Disneyland break the rules. Queues are no fun. We all know that, but at Disneyland you spend 80% of your day queuing. You can't avoid it. So what do? They make the queue fun. They have Mickey Mouse talking to you. They have video screens. They make the queue look a bit smaller. And they even put up little signs that tell you how long to go. And if you've ever measured the time, amazingly enough, they break another rule. Usually the rule is, or you always exaggerate. You always make it sound better than it is. But they do the opposite. When they say it's 30 minutes from here and you time it, it's only 25. Because the kids will notice if 30 minutes have gone and we're still not there. As it is, oh, fantastic. We're there already. We expected it to be longer. It was shorter. So all of those are nice little rules that can be very helpfully broken and have been. But I want to do a little sort of rule reversal exercise. Now I know that quite a few of you have got children of various ages. Now how many of you have or know teenagers contemplating life after A-levels? Quite a few? And it's a difficult time. Because what's the rule that a bright child should do after they've done their A-levels? Where next? University. So the rule is you must go to university to get a good job. Now I'd have to say, again, sometimes things happen that make the rule change. Now, I teach at a university, and I look at the students and I feel terribly sorry for them, because the biggest challenge facing them isn't getting into university, it's what? Getting a job afterwards. The world has changed. And that rule, well, we've got huge graduate unemployment. The kids come out with £50,000 plus of debt. They've got a mortgage on their backs and they haven't got a house to show for it. And if they've done the sort of degree I did, no obvious skills. They haven't done a biology degree or an electronics degree. They've done a social services, English literature, or whatever it might be. So the question is, let's be creative. What should they do instead? So what would you recommend to kids these days? Yep. Say that again. Get a job with its own training. Yep. Can you say that again?
Study with the Open University.
Study with, you're not with the Open University, are you? Very good. Lovely bit of rule breaking there. Shouldn't boast about our own business, but I'll just slip it in carefully. No one likes it. Good answer though, absolutely. So get a job and go to the Open University. Any other thoughts? What would you say to kids these days? I mean, yeah, go and get some life skills, so maybe go and do the traveling bit first while you're still young enough. But I came across one lad in particular. I was doing some work with a sort of website company, and this lad was 16. He'd left school at 16, not 18. And because he was brilliant with computers, this company said, why would we want to wait until you're 18 or 21? You come and work for us right now. And he was doing great. And he was already earning what a graduate might be earning if they could get a graduate job, really 5 years later. So where's he going to be in 5 years' time? He'll probably do some studies, he'll probably do a professional qualification, and it was great. So I suppose what I'm saying to people today is you've got to be constantly willing to break the rule, because the rule can often be a real hindrance. And just because everybody else is doing it, all their friends are going off to university, I think, well, in that case, I should be doing it too. That's the rule. It's what my friends are doing. Suddenly we find that maybe we change our minds. But it's difficult, because to go it alone All your friends are doing it, you do something differently. But if you think in the stock market, when everybody else is buying shares, what do the experts do? They sell them. When everybody else is selling shares, they say, that's great, they're a bargain, I'll buy them. But it does take a little bit of bravery, a little bit of willingness to go it alone. But of course, if you've got your positive mental attitude going, and you've done your research, you've done your map of the world, you're in good shape. So those are the 3 techniques I wanted to just talk about briefly this morning. Put yourself into that positive frame of mind, and nothing is impossible. But look at the world in a new way, reanalyze what you're dealing with, and the difficult and the complex can suddenly become very simple and straightforward. And sometimes those little rules, those little conventions that are part of life, you just have to break them from time to time. Don't expect people to thank you for any of these things, because they are stuck in their view of the world. They're stuck with their rules. But as long as you're right, you'll succeed. Funnily enough, the theme of this morning has been, I've talked about kids a lot. I've got one more thought about kids. Were we more creative when we were very young? Yep, I think we were. We had the ability to come up with things that were quite remarkable. The only thing I remember about I did a part of my degree was in philosophy, which was a damn foolish thing to do. And the only thing I remember about it, don't remember a thing that I learnt in the lessons or the lectures, but one of my fellow students was a pensioner, an old chap in his 70s, and he said, we were having a cup of coffee after the seminar, and he said, my granddaughter said something really interesting today, far more interesting than anything I heard in the lecture or the seminar. And they'd been building a Lego windmill together, making this windmill out of Lego, and it kept falling apart, kept breaking. And he turned to his little granddaughter, he said, well, breaking, that's half the fun, isn't it? And she said to him, what's the other half? And he kind of stopped and thought, well, that's the most important philosophical question I've heard. So children have got more energy. They're more positive. They believe anything is possible. When they say, are we there yet? 5 minutes after you started the journey, it's because they think they can travel at Doctor Who light speed. They've got fewer maps of the world, so they aren't imprisoned by those conventions around them, and they see things in a fresh way. And finally, they hate rules. Remember, when you tell them, don't touch the wet paint, that is the green light to smearing their hands all over it. So, I hope you've enjoyed this little rapid run through, and if you have, why not book on the one-day course? With a bit of luck you won't see me there, but we'll see one of my excellent colleagues. We do all of this and a whole lot more, and the nice thing, what we try and do is encourage people to unveil some of their own problems and challenges, so that it's a chance to try out the techniques and actually leave the course not just with the tools, but with some practical solutions to some of the difficulties, obstacles, and ambitions that you've got along the way. So I'm going to draw things to a halt there, but happy to answer any questions. But otherwise, may I just thank you for taking the time. Thank you very much.